Hello guys, welcome to a new video, and in this new video we are going to go over the Amazon Web Services Architect Associate Level Certification, and we are going to start talking about Identity Access Management, or IAM, or IAM, and IAM it stands for Identity Access Management, and enables you to manage access to AWS services and resources securely. Okay, so using IA, let's just say IAM, IAM, you can create and manage AWS users and groups. You can also create roles and policies in there. And like I said, for the policies which has permissions to allow and deny their access to AWS resources. And identity access management is a feature to your AWS account offered at no additional charge, which is nice. There is no charge um, for having or using IAM. And you will be charged only for the use of other AWS services by your users. Okay, like S3, EC2, and all this good stuff. So here are the identities uh, for IAM, and the first one is the user. So you are able to create users, and user is basically an identity that you create in AWS to represent the person or application that uses it to interact with AWS, right? And we also have groups. So A in IAM, we are going to be able to create groups and put users in those groups and then assign those groups a policy. And in groups is a collection of identity access management users, and groups lets you specify permissions for multiple users, which can make it easier to manage the permission for those users, right? And policies, it is attached to the group and defines what the users have access to. And when a user makes a request in AWS, the AWS enforcement code checks whether the user is authenticated, if they are signed in, and authorized if it has permissions, right? So you manage uh, access in AWS by creating policies and attaching them to the identity access management identities or AWS resources, right? So this is how it works. We create users, groups, and policies. Let's say that I create the user um, Jack, right? And Jack he's going to be in the network or in the S3. He's going to be the one to manage. cre- He's going to be the one maintaining the S3 buckets. So I'm going to put Jack in the S3 admin group that I created, right? And then in that group, he's going to have access to the S3 buckets as an admin. So he's going to be able to delete, edit, add, and create new buckets and objects inside the buckets. So that's how it works, just the same as computers, right? Um, and if a user does not have a policy attached to it, it won't have access to anything because of that implicit denied that AWS has. If you don't have an explicit allow, or if you don't have anything explicitly um, in your account, then you won't have access to it. And that's just how AWS works. And we also have roles, and in identity access management role is an identity that you can create in your account that has specific permissions, right? And a role is similar to a IAM user in that it is an AWS identity with permission policies that determine what the identity can and cannot do in AWS. So what we could do is when you create a role, let's say that you are the person in charge of the S3 buckets, but the person in charge of the EC2 instances is not going to be there for a week, and we need somebody to have access to the EC2. What we could do is instead of just adding the Jack that works in S3 and knows how to use the EC2 instances, what's going to happen is we are going to let him use a role. So he's going to like log into a role, which is going to be the EC2 role until the person that manages the EC2 roles comes back. And whenever he comes back, he can just like sign out of the role and he's going to go back to just doing his S3. So that's how roles work. And however, instead of being uniquely associated with one person, a role is intended to be assumable by anyone who needs it, right? Like in that case of Jack that needed it to manage the EC2 because the guy that manages the EC2 was going on vacation. So he needed access to that. So he assumed that role for that week that that person that manages the EC2 was not going to be there. So that's how roles are are used. So you don't have to just like assign Jack to the EC2 groups. You don't have to do that. You can just let Jack get into that EC2 role. Okay. And here how the groups work. You can um, create some groups. Let's say the here's my AWS account, and then we can create some groups like the admin groups, and we can put Bob, which is a user, and Susan, which is a user, and inside the group we can add a policy. And inside the policy, it's going to say that they are admins and they have access to most of the stuff, right? And then we create another group, which is a developer group, and we put Nate, Brad, and Dev App 1. And in Dev App 1, this one is going to be not a user. It's going to be using it's going to be something out that is going to be um, like an application, and it's going to need access via the I believe it's the access keys. But then we have Brad and Nate, and we can add a policy to that group so they can have access to development inside the AWS, and then we can have like a group called test, and we can put a couple of test account in there so we can test different stuff that we want to do before we actually put it in effect in a production in a user that is in production, right? And here how the how this works, how you authenticate and all that. And before I explain this picture right here, if no policy attached to the user cannot do anything due to the implicit deny rule. Okay, so it needs to have some policy or permission attached to the user. Otherwise, they won't be able to do anything because AWS has that implicit deny. Okay, so here we go. We have the user that is going to authenticate with username and password, or optionally is going to also have an MFA or multi-factor authentication. So after the user is authenticated, and we also have a like an AWS software development kits that could potentially be trying to authenticate to the identity access management right here. And after that is done, what's going to happen is it's going to check what that particular user or that particular um, software has access to. So after they get authenticated, then they're going to see what they have access to. So that means that what they are authorized to do in this account. And it goes by check right here. As you can see, authenticated identities, right? After they are authenticated, um, identities are authorized for resources access based on any inline or attached policies. And here it is. So if you have access to this, then you're going to have access to that. And if you don't, then it's going to be an X and you won't be able to access it, right? And the root user, when you first create an Amazon Web Services account, you begin with a single sign-in identity that has complete access to all AWS services and resources in the account. This identity is called the AWS account root user, and it's accessed by signing in with the email address and password that you used to create the account. Okay, and that is the user that I have been using because I have not configured any other user for my AWS account. And then we have some of A the IAM best practices. And as you can see, we can best practices for the identity access management is to lock away your AWS account root user access keys. So what I want to do is either what you can do is you can enable MFA if you're going to continue using it, or you can just lock it away and save those keys and don't use it. You can also, for best practices, you want to create individual identity access management users. You want to use groups to assign permissions to those users. You want to grant the least privilege, right? So if somebody's going to be working with S3 buckets, only giving access to S3 buckets. You can get started using permissions with AWS managed policies. Use customer managed policies instead of inline policies. So you're going to have to create your own policies. Use access levels to review identity access management permissions. Configure strong password policy for your users. You want to enable multi-factor authentication for those users, or for at least for the admin users. Use role for applications that run on Amazon EC2 instances. Use roles to delegate permissions. Do not share any access keys, of course. Rotate credentials regularly. Remove unnecessary credentials. Use policy conditions for extra security. Monitor activity in your AWS account, and do a video presentation about the identity access management best practices for your users. And there's a link right there I'm going to put in my video so you can go ahead and take a look at that. And for the business use case, what we could do, we can initial setup of example corporation, use case for identity access management with Amazon EC2, and use case for Amazon for identity access management with Amazon S3. And I'm going to leave that link over here. Those are, you should read those use cases as well as the best practices. And this is it for this PowerPoint. So let's go ahead and take a look of what I was talking about. We are going to go into my Amazon Management Console. And if you want to find the identity access management, you're going to have to go into uh, it's not networking, I believe it is security, identity, and compliance. You can see it right here. Okay, and as you can see, the security status of it, I don't have MFA on your root account. You should have that. You should create individual identity access management users, and you need to apply password policies. So we have not done that. We can just do that in this video. If you go, I believe, to account settings, you can set a password policy for everybody. If you want to do 8 characters, require at least one uppercase, one lowercase, at least one number, require at least one non-alphanumeric character. You want to enable password expiration, 90 days looks good. Password expiration requires, no, let's not do that. That's going to be a pain in the butt. Allow users to change their own password, and that's fine. Prevent uh, reuse password up to 5, that's good. You can go ahead and save those changes. That's good. And now if we go to the dashboard, we should have one less security status that we need to do. Um, so we are good on that. And as you can see right here, we can find that we have the groups. So we can go ahead and create groups if we want to. I created one. It looks like I created one, but I thought I removed this, but it's still there. Let's go ahead and remove it. There we go. So from right here, you can create groups. Right here, you can create a user. So if we create you first, what you want to do, you want to create a user. Oh, you want to create a groups, and then after you create the groups, you want to create the users, and then add those users to the group. It doesn't really matter if you create the user first, and then you create the group, and then you add the users to that group. Um, if you want to create your own policies, you can go ahead and create your own policies and name those policies over here. Here's the users, and if you want to create a couple roles, you can also go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and delete those roles. I don't remember creating those roles ever. This one was 19 days ago. I do not remember that. So let's go ahead and delete those. And this is it for this video, guys. So on the next video, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be creating some groups, users, and also some policies, and we're going to assign those users permission and see how you are able to log in to that. So this is it for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoy this video on IAM roles. And one other thing is that on IAM, no, let's leave that for the next video. I'm not going to say it. So this is it for this video, guys. And if you guys enjoy this video, hey, why don't you guys go ahead and follow me on Twitter at TCNA Daily Tips. And if you don't have a Twitter account, hey, come on Twitter, create a Twitter account, and then follow me on Twitter at TCNA Daily Tips. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you on the next one, and I love you guys. Bye bye.